Thank you, Director. First of all, you just gave us a list that is very similar to ones that all of us have read and that I addressed in my opening statement. These are programs that were funded in the Biden administration. There's no way that President Trump's administration would allow such wasteful and questionable spending. So I am puzzled why you would be cutting funds that the president signed in March as part of the continuing resolution, when now your appointees are there to prevent the kind of spending that most of us would find to be reprehensible and a waste of taxpayer dollars.
Thank you for the question, Senator. And I was, in listening to the opening statements, I was encouraged to hear the bipartisan outrage for some of these programs. I would add a couple points in direct response to your question, Senator. These are largely multi-year funding. There is some expiring funds with regard to fiscal year 25, but the way that this was structured was to find the waste, the abuse, the average on an annual basis for grants that get re-upped each and every year. And so we are in $37 trillion in national debt. Our view is to see, when we look at these programs, can we do it cheaper as evidence about what we find, and then to reflect that with some savings to the taxpayer. We think that we're doing that here, and that is the extent to which we don't want to just plow it into additional spending. We actually want to have it lead to a more efficient federal program in the area, PEPFAR or whatever economic development assistance that we might find. The other thing I would say is the extent to which the normal pipeline for these funds is something we're taking a close look at. I mean, we don't want to re-up the same spending to the same NGO with a different grant title. That's not success here. And so it will take some time for us to be able to find the types of groups that can dispense these funds in ways that are consistent with this administration's priorities.
Well, let me also take issue with your statement that, quote, no life-saving treatments will be impacted. When you look at PEPFAR, you are eliminating a lot of the prevention programs. And just this past week, the FDA approved a twice-yearly injection that provided significant protection against HIV infection in clinical trials. We've seen literally 26 million lives saved through a combination of prevention and treatment. We can't tell, in looking at the information that you've given us, because it's not specific, whether the rescission would harm our efforts to prevent the spread of tuberculosis or polio or malaria. Those are all programs that have been proven effective. I'm particularly concerned also about what the impact would be on the maternal and child health programs. We can't tell, but we do know that important food supplements, the ready-to-use therapeutic food that I'm showing you right here, which is peanut butter-based but greatly enriched, have saved the lives of premature babies and malnourished children. We know that these prenatal vitamins have allowed impoverished mothers in Africa to safely deliver healthy children. These are not only the right thing to do for humanitarian reasons, but they're incredible instruments of soft power. So let me ask a specific question. Does your rescissions package cut the life-saving multivitamins for pregnant mothers and the food supplement that's used for malnourished children?
No, we apportion that funding consistent with this administration's priorities and that funding is flowing. What we are getting at is preventative, and I do put it in air quotes. I'm not saying there's not good preventative care, and the example that you gave with regard to drugs that are being approved just this week in FDA are in another category of drugs that will largely be protected, certainly will under this rescissions bill. And again, there's $10 billion left for PEPFAR, even if this rescissions bill were to pass. What we're getting at is the extent to which we have identified in literally every program. Part of the exercise here is that all of these programs are in some respects in the dock because we have identified the extent to which all of them are funding liberal NGOs doing activities that the American people wouldn't support. And that just because they're in the PEPFAR account shouldn't make them immune for a rescission. And so when we look at preventative and we're saying in $9.3 million to advise Russian doctors on how to perform abortions and gender analysis, $4.4 in funding to recruit gender and inclusive development experts, $45 million to International Planned Parenthood Federation. This isn't the American people. If we went to a diner and we said, "What is preventative care?" and we included all manner of doctors in that diner conversation, and said, "What's the kind of preventative care that you would support and you think would make sense?" My guess is it would be in the area of the drugs that you mentioned. My guess it would also not include this kind of waste and abuse. This is actual savings to the taxpayer that we could recoup, and at the end of this rescissions package, still have $38 billion in unobligated balances, $10 billion in unobligated balances for PEPFAR.
But Director, those kinds of wasteful expenditures are not going to occur in this administration. That's my whole point. And I know for a fact that both of these products, which are made entirely in America, are being held up. This peanut butter-based supplement is in a warehouse, and there's worried by the private foundations that are contributing to the undertaking of this program that they're going to expire because they can't get the federal funding to distribute them.
Senator, the funds were apportioned. We're happy to look into. There has been a lot of news out there with regard to what is occurring. I just read this morning with regard to one of the drugs that you just mentioned. And again, we have it protected with regard to this rescissions package. And so I understand we haven't been in the business of doing rescissions packages for quite some time. We're getting those muscle memories going again. But we can work with Congress to make sure these types of things are protected on an ongoing basis. But I do believe it's important to have a reflection on the fact that if you find savings, and you know that that generally occurs on an annual grant by grant process annually, can you rescind that money in such a way that we actually get something for it? And I am worried, Senator, about the extent to which if we just have the same amount of money that's there annually, and you just say it's got to go, that you are putting massive pressure on the bureaucracy to get it out the door to the same NGOs that we are now here to deal with the extent to which they have been wasting the American people's hard-earned tax dollars. And I am concerned about that.
Senator Murray.
If you don't mind, just one point of clarification. The stuff you read, did that come from PEPFAR?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.